Welcome back to Leadership Devotionals. Today, we will still be in the case of Peter, and this will be the fourth episode already. And this is a story of a transformation of a person from someone who is rash, overtly assertive, has a self-serving vision, overestimates his own abilities and resulting to dysfunctional relationships, into someone who became one of the foundational leader of the early Christian church. Today we will be talking about Peter's craving for power and possession. I think such kind of craving, such kind of want, such kind of need can be safely said that is present to some degree among leaders of today. And Peter has also experienced that. You see, communities or people wherein their organization, it's either a company, a society, a corporation, an institution, or whatever it is. Community, especially those of religious or faith-based institutions, thrive on shared and decentralized power. As we know that faith-based institutions like the one I used to lead before, it's run by what we call a board of trustees. A board of trustees are representatives from the various stakeholders of the church or from the various stakeholders of the institution or the greater organization that owns the healthcare institution that I have led. And so it thrives on shared and decentralized power. Unlike proprietary organizations or corporations that are for profit, wherein there's just a few or a handful of people who control the management and the affairs of that corporation, wherewith power is centralized on these few leaders. But for communities, especially communities of faith, they thrive on shared and decentralized power. In terms of leadership, this distribution of power often includes mentoring, delegating authority, and I emphasize this, delegating authority. A lot of leaders, when we talk about delegation, instead of delegating authority, they delegate work. And when they delegate work, they don't have work for themselves and as if they are just, enjoying their way around. But the true way of delegation is actually delegating authority. Of course, in delegating authority, it includes also a certain amount of work. Sharing, okay, so these terms of distribution of power includes mentoring, delegating authority, sharing decision making, preparing successors. As John Maxwell would have properly said in his book, The Legacy, the laws of leadership and the law of legacy, he said that where there is no successor, there is no success in leadership. And so, part of distribution of power is preparing successors and fostering interdependence among members rather than simple independence or dependence upon a dominant leader. Now, in the case of Peter, the spiritual evidence of Peter's use of power early in his life is fragmentary and more suggestive than conclusive. We can just, somehow read between the lines on the story that we can read in the Gospels. However, the clues seem to reveal Peter leaning toward power retention rather than power sharing. Let me cite a few examples. Peter is often the spokesperson or the spokesman of the 12 disciples. He he feels that being the assertive one, the rash one, he wants to speak for the 12, but actually in reality, he was just simply speaking his mind out. You know what? He would even correct and even rebuke his master, his rabbi, Jesus. In plenty of times, it's recorded in Matthew 16 verse 22, Luke 8 verse 45. Instances wherein, when Jesus was predicting his suffering, his mission that will eventually lead to his death, Peter pulled him aside and rebuked him and said, "How can you say that you are the Messiah? You're not supposed to die. You're not supposed to suffer." He also gives out, He also gives out quick and unsolicited suggestions. Just like when there was the incident in the Mount of Transfiguration, and it was basically the show of support of God the Father to Jesus Christ, who is about to be nailed on the cross. And so he sent Elijah and Moses to comfort Jesus. But when Peter saw the glory that was there in the Mount of Transfiguration, and Christ was, magnified like the sun, his suggestion was something like, let us immortalize this event. Let's build 3 tabernacles here to tell everyone of what happened here. He was not even sensitive to the needs of companionship of his master. He reacts violently to Jesus' abandonment of positional power. When Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he did not, he said, I could call 12 legions of angels. Peter reacted violently when Jesus was just like a lamb, a meek lamb, guided to be sacrificed. Peter pulled out his sword and tried to defend Jesus by cutting the ear of the servant of the high priest. And of course, other situations where he corrects and would even, rebuke Jesus that he will never deny Jesus. When Jesus told him that, some of you will stumble, said, I will not stumble, unlike the rest of my companions. The final clues about Peter's relationship to power are found in his behavior during the last 24 hours of Jesus Christ's death. He grasps frantically to that power. He refuses to accept Jesus' prediction of his denial and forces a different meaning on Jesus' words. He also tried to force a different outcome in Jesus' arrest. And finally, he uses anger, intimidation, and swearing. 3 times he used that to force a different response from his accusers. When he was there in the outer court of the temple, and Jesus was being tried there inside in the office, in the court of the high priest, someone recognized him and said, "You are with that man." He vehemently denied. Then when he was again recognized by another lad, he started to be angry, and eventually he started swearing. His denial. He started swearing in his denial. Peter uses his dwindling sense of power in a frantic effort to bolster his sense of control. This is a phenomenon that is quite often seen among leaders, among us leaders, and so we have to be careful about this. But the beauty about this devotional is that even though this was found in Peter, even though this kind of trait may be found in you, may be found in me, the beauty about this is that Jesus was patient with Peter, and eventually Peter became triumphant over these kinds of traits. Now, Jesus here, the next part is I'm going to tell you, now look, okay? Now look how Jesus view the power that was given to him. You know, it is the opposite of Jesus' use of power and the opposite of Jesus' plan for leadership and power in his new community of faith, as what Peter was showing. And so let's dig a little on how Jesus demonstrates a different relationship to power in the same context of event where Peter showed differently. Jesus will also show a different path, a path that we would all wish you and I will follow. Jesus demonstrates his words when he said in John 10 verse 18, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down on my own accord." And we know that he laid it down because of his innate characteristic that he loves you and me. He loves us so much. It was, the sacrifice was born out of his inner identity and his inner self. With that attitude toward his own power, Jesus steps towards the murderous mob to regroup after they fall to the ground. You see, after the initial gathering on Jesus to accuse him, and when Jesus healed the ear of the servant of the high priest, there was a commotion and some of them fainted, some of them fell on the ground. But Jesus quietly just simply stepped towards them. He did not, escape, either wanted to escape, or things like that, or even he rebuked Peter and said, "I can call 12 legions of angels if I want to, but this is the will of the Father and it has to be fulfilled." He also refuses violent counterattacks. Okay, violent counterattacks when he was, accused wrongly. He calmly challenges his accusers on their unjust charges and tactics, and reframes the interrogation process with Pilate. Okay? Just imagine this, even already at the point of about being to be sentenced to death, Jesus still opened a way of evangelizing Pilate. He reframes the interrogation process with Pilate in order to make a spiritual appeal to a confused and lost man. He makes an extended elderly care plan for his mother from the cross. He was already at the ebb of death, and yet he was still other-centered. He still endorsed and created an elderly care plan for his mother when he entrusted his mother to John. He prayed even for his executioners, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." And he offers a kingdom hospitality and eternal life to a dying man next to him. Just imagine that amount of service and love that flows from Jesus instead of wielding power and authority. That's the kind of leader serving even towards the end. In short, Jesus exercises his power in the final 24 hours of his life to give power away, to empower people to also have eternal life. Jesus consistently modeled a community leader capable of sharing rather than grasping at power. And so, Jesus mentored Peter and the rest of the disciples and fellow leaders. Jesus, through this show of how He uses power, can also mentor you, can mentor me in our leadership journey. Just ask for it. God bless you today.